I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. So we were doing this book Nogat Tzedek, which was published by somebody who's a reformer. But again, the line between what it means to be a reformer and what it means not to be is a little bit blurry at this period. You have obviously tremendous Talmudic Chachamim who study secular studies, who see the Enlightenment as something important. Now it's also interesting in that article they mentioned that before Hamburg there were two small shuls in Berlin, and that's I think why they mentioned Berlin here. The tshuva that the rabbi we were looking at, the posik we were looking at, writes back to the publisher of this book. I'm having trouble now. He's writing back to Berlin because that's where the very beginning. The shul in Hamburg has not been built in 1880. So they had asked about these things, about praying in Sfardit, whether you could do, I guess, a Heichah Kedusha for all tefillot, and whether you could use an organ. So he had said on the question of Sfardit, he seemed to think that was okay. Now, obviously, others are going to say, well, no, you can't do change is forbidden. Yes. But and then in terms of tefillah, quietly getting rid of the silent amidah, that he did not seem to be entirely clear. He mentioned the Gemara that says you should do the silent prayer because then you can't hear each other confessing your sins. But and he says it's important. Yeah, it doesn't seem to really come down about it a lot. And then now he talks about the organ. This is Davar Shirish or something Beis Hashem regarding this thing that you have put an instrument in the house of God. Now it's interesting. He understands, from their point of view, why they're doing it, and I'm assuming that they're all being honest about their intent. It says Man karev et achenu asher nizru mimikdash elaketzvakot el ha'avodah. So he says, you're doing it. Why are you doing it? You're doing it in order to be makar people, to bring people close. And if you just want to give up Judaism, so you're not going to, you're just going to leave. But why are they making these reformations? In order to, I'm assuming that there was a matzah because we know there was in the Hamburg synagogue, and they don't even mention that here, right? These are small changes. During Corona, we got rid of we didn't really get rid of the sound. We did have the Kedusha, but, for a while, people were like, oh, why do we go back, So, in order to bring, you're doing it in order to bring Jews close who have been distanced from the shuls. Libot hanashim and to inspire the hearts of women and children to love God and to fear God, right? Not why. What does this mean? What does it mean, men and women? In other words, obviously, what he means is that women don't know how to pray, and if they don't know how to pray, so then music is going to inspire them. I mean, this is true. I just met with a congregant yesterday. She said, "Oh, so happy! Friday night there, you led davening, you sang a little more than usual. Singing and maybe dancing, it inspires." V'haya kenegdan hamanagain kilem ruach Hashem. You have somebody singing and with instruments that inspires. Gam hamanagain hazeh hu arel choresh choshev hamiyod lemlachto. First of all, he's an expert at playing these instruments. Second of all, he's not Jewish. Those both bode very well. V'zeh ein tuluna ve'ein mifkadin liyahoda hegot tarat Hashem hilchata b'yosher v'emunah shekvar poshat haminag barov moshavot b'nei Yisrael lahalos lachabos neiros ayidei oral b'Shabbos b'batei tefillah. So he says, one question here is having a non-Jew do things for you on Shabbos. So he says, already we know that it has become a widespread custom in most places where Jews live, this is interesting, to have a non-Jew put out the candles in the shul. I guess he means on Friday night, right? In other words, candles were expensive. That's what lit up the shul, probably oil lights. So you're not going to let them burn all Friday night. So everybody leaves the shul and some non-Jewish person comes in and puts up the candle. That seems to be very common. Kadumo Rabo Isurei Shvashit Yerazam. And we know that there were Isurei de Rabbanan, there were forbidden things rabbinically that the rabbis did permit in certain instances. Yeshma Rabbeinu haposkim ha'achronim shetiru lanagin b'klishir ba'ofen zeh af below rina v'tfilas m'chaschulin. And we know that some later authorities did permit asking a non-Jew to play instruments, even if it was just for, now he says here, even if it wasn't for prayer, it was a l'simchas chulin. I don't know what simchas chulin is. What you find in Shulchan Aruch is that it's for a chassan and kala, for a bride and groom. Simchas chulin sounds like chulin means profane, a profane joy. So I don't know if that's really halacha. If we're about Shabbos and Yom Tov. Unless chulin, he means here not daven. Nishanu al divrei rabotenu hatzarfatim akadmonim kinoda, and the French rabbis, I guess, did it. And if we're going to say that this is a way of bringing people close, that are far away from Judaism, they're far from the house of God, and they're almost gone from V'zod yavo kodesh, and music and shul is going to bring them to shul. Hein tik teshu bazeh et shem shemayim barabbos. That's going to be a great sanctification of God's name. In mitzvah takifa mizot lumat now, and that's a tremendous mitzvah. Very interesting, right? In other words, it's a lot of approaches you can take here. Right? You could imagine a different rabbi would have taken the approach. Are you kidding me? You're going to have an organ and shul? That's the slippery slope. That's the beginning of the end. That's what's going to cause people to assimilate. He's taking the opposite approach. He's saying, okay, I understand why you want to do this. You want to do this to be McCarthy, bring people close. Now, obviously, a lot has to do with who he is, how he sees the world, partly why him and so forth. But there are. As you saw in that article, it's an interesting question. What does it mean to be a rabbi in period who's open-minded? Does that mean you're Orthodox, you're Reformer? What are you? In other words, it's like you have this today with different groups of Jews, different movements within Orthodox. Okay, so you want me to weigh it. So I say this is a good thing. You believe pigua kal lifrots. Without breaking through boundaries, in Bahalacha, in Jewish law, ותהליכות מזימות בהלכה בזה, ואומר דברים כה וכה, איך מותר, לפני כל יודע דעת סודן, ולומד האמיתי השוקד באמונה, הגוד בתורתנו והלכותיה. יעמול בוערים בעם אשר אף כל צלצל כנף, יראוס יערום באזנם, ופעלת חדשה סלמה, יריבו וירישו, אל תזל אמרתי. I think what he's saying here, it's a little bit hard to understand his language, very flowery right here. I think what he's saying is that people fall on different sides of this question and how this decision is going to impact. I think what he's saying here is people aren't all going to listen to me. מבין ולומד, נאמן את ידו להגיע את דברינו אלה על פי התורה וחוקיה והלכותינו, אז תכיר ותדעו כי הקהל המזרוני החל בחסדו, אם תמים דרכי בתורתו על ידי. Very flowery language. על ידי What he's saying here is talking about the general approach. Go to the next paragraph. That which is to me and to you, the wise of heart, I think here's my advice to you. To open the Shul day and night, in the morning and the evening. And know that you're going to have a minyan. Abitu u'ru b'kerev shechnechem misaviv. Look around your neighborhood. Animsa beit muad asher lo yiftach lipam achapishvur. Do you find a gathering place that isn't open at least once a week? Our places, our houses of worship, are open twice a day. Everybody will come. Do what is right in the eyes of God. Very unclear what is the answer. Because I understand, why you're doing this. It's funny, he doesn't seem to be saying it very clearly. But he does say you shouldn't break through the boundaries of Allah. It sounds like he's saying, I'm trying to find a way to permit it. Definitely doesn't seem to, he seems in the beginning to say he understands why they want to do it and that it seems like a good idea. But then he seems to be saying, if you look at it through the eyes of halacha, That building a building on eggshells. Yasad binyan al klipe beitzim maseh akvish, on bad intent. Will a weak person say, I am strong? I think what he's saying is we don't really, he's saying, I understand why you're doing it. It's a very good idea, he says. You want to sanctify God's name. And if you bring the people to Shul, that'll be good. But I think he's trying to say here that you shouldn't. That you will be building your Judaism on a very flimsy basis. In Yad Hashem astaket hashagavu ibarim lechem neged kamem mishum besitnei. Very hard to figure out what it means here. His language is difficult, and he's not saying it clearly. So I'm not, and then he, and then he seems to give them the advice, just, make sure there's a minyan twice a day. And people will come and gather. So he doesn't seem to be forbidding it. He does admit that people permit it because he can't forbid it. He understands that hiring a non-Jew on Shabbat to play music, there is much precedent. And here he gives them the advice. He doesn't mention playing instruments. He just gives them the advice to stay open twice a day, make sure there's a minyan. Welcome, people. In this paragraph, this is where he's hedging. Right? He says it's mutter up here. Down here, he gives them the advice that they should just open the shul. And do what is right in the eyes of God. In this paragraph, this is where I think what he's saying is don't do it, but he doesn't say that very clearly. What he does say is, my advice to you is make sure there's a minyan. So that's what it seems to me. It's very hard, a little bit hard to figure out. So he has no problem with Sephardi pronunciation. He does not seem to have a problem. He seems to be a little bit unclear on the question of getting rid of the silent Amidah. He gives some reasons why you shouldn't. And then when it comes to the organ, although he says he understands why they're doing it, and they have good reasons for doing it, and he understands halachically why you might permit it, he seems to think that you will be building your Judaism on something flimsy. In other words, the argument, I think, is the slippery slope argument. Hard to understand. But that's, I'm happy to send this to you. But it's interesting. You can't sort of rule it all out halachically. There is precedent, and you can certainly make an argument that it's permitted, but he does not seem to recommend. Some other long letters here. They've written basically 3 rabbis. Him. Let's see who the other 2 are. 2. Right. And this is the Av Bezdin of Arad in Hungary. Arad. The first letter is writer of the Shul, Yair Nativ. This is the rabbi of Rome. All right, maybe we'll look at, this is Rabbi Rekanati of Rome. All right, so I'm going to find out who these, we saw a little bit about that person. We'll find an article. I'm going to see if I can find some identity in these other 2 rabbis. There's basically 2 books that are kind of bound together. One is these 3 responsa on these questions. And in that article, if you saw it, there's a big argument. This Moshe Kunitz, Rabbi Moshe Kunitz, big argument later on in history. Eliezer Lieberman, that's the person who published these. And this is sort of the second part of the book, called Or Noga. And let's see what it is. I don't think it's responsive as much. Okay, sorry, this has been a little bit unclear, but I think actually that tells us something. I think there's an attempt to be unclear on his part, which is not surprising because he's trapped. On the one hand, he's trapped between halakha on the one hand. On the other hand, he's not going to just dismiss it all out of hand like those to the right of him. He's a centrist. So what do you do? Right? It's so familiar with this today. We understand what the Jews need, understand it's halakhically permitted. Do you side? If you're sort of more, Haredi minded, you just forbid it. If you're not, you may still be worried about the implications. Where in other words, the spectrum of Orthodox experience today, I think, before, not necessarily that much different. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.